Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight to learn about a fascinating topic. The MIT Enterprise Forum is very excited to feature such a sterling panel to talk about AI, automation, and its impacts to work and society. We are in debt to Seattle U and to Town Hall for helping us sponsor these events, Artefect, our season sponsor, and to Grant Thornton for being our event sponsor tonight. Tonight we have an impressive panel, and I'm very impressed by our moderator, the CEO of Artefact, Rob Gerling. Artefact is a Seattle-based design consulting firm who are on the cutting edge of a lot of technologies, including AI. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Rob and get this event started. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Ben. And thank you for MIT for organizing this, and I'm super excited about our panelists. I wanted to just quickly introduce Artefact. CEO, we're a design organization, and we operate in this interesting place between, we don't consider ourselves really technologists, although we're constantly having to wrestle with new technologies and build the human interface to them. We consider ourselves humanists working in the technology space, and so we're always pretty skeptical about new technology, actually, and try to do our best to act responsibly and ethically in the design of the things we're creating. And that's kind of how we distinguish ourselves in our space. And I think this topic is near and dear to my heart. I've been, for the last 4 years, kind of doing discussions and talks about this issue and how do we design responsibly, knowing that some of the things we're doing are displacing people from work, and what is our ethical responsibility in that scenario. So without getting into the topic yet, I wanted to first, that's introduction to me, introduce our fantastic panel. First of all, Dan Liebling is an engineer at Google Research. Dan, his work has been largely on conversation and translation systems. And Dan has a personal passion to work on how this AI technology will help create better civic networks and be a part of civic discourse. Is that right? That's fair. Next, we have Caleb Weaver. Caleb works at Uber, specifically on representing its interests from a public policy perspective. He comes from a background in law and communications. Has worked for the Obama administration, both on the campaign side and under the USDA for a couple of years, or 8 years, I believe. Wide-ranging background. Not a technologist, but very much on the how will the strategy of Uber evolve with AI technology. Third, Ajay Kumar. Joins us from the artificial intelligence engineer at Microsoft Research. She's passionate about investigating the impact of AI on society and is studying ways to develop AI systems that are reliable, unbiased, and trustworthy. And so this will be a theme of our conversation this evening. She has over 40 peer-reviewed publications at the top AI and HCI venues and has served in the first study panel of Stanford's 100-year study of AI. This is actually probably filled with some of the foremost minds in the world on the topic of how AI will impact the future. And Ajay is part of that editorial group and thinking group. Cesar Keller is a former Microsoft executive from Latin America, Nokia, HTC, now CEO of Workplace 21, a startup that's reshaping the future of work. And is particularly interested, he's a writer and speaker who's particularly interested in how education and AI will impact the future of education and jobs in particular, and the future of education in particular. And last but not least, Aaron Reich. Aaron is Senior Director of Innovation and Incubation at Avanade. Avanade is a joint venture between Accenture and Microsoft that was launched in 2000. He focuses on setting and enabling the company's technology vision, specifically with regards to artificial intelligence. So he helps lead Avanad's Center of Excellence on AI and is deploying the AI technologies into the enterprise as part of his daily practice. So we have a good representation here, I think. Please welcome me and just giving them a quick round of applause. Thanking you for their time. All right, so the talk, I want to sort of anchor the talk. This is a sprawling topic, and it could go all sorts of squirrely ways. I want to sort of anchor it in a 15-year context. So we're going to try to sort of not get into the what happens when general intelligence emerges and all of the, beyond the singularity kind of debate. We're going to try to sort of frame this in the how is this going to impact us in the not too distant future. So we're going to try to constrain that. 2030-ish is where we're going to try to keep the conversation somewhat anchored. And I think we've all, and probably this room is represented by a lot of people working in this space or just super curious about this space. The elephant in the room is job displacement. And that's where I want to sort of focus the conversation, at least initially in the evening. I want to sort of get a sense of the room. I can just about see the back of the room. And I want our panelists to participate in this little survey I'm going to do here. I'd like you to put your hands in the air if you believe that by 2030, AI will have created more jobs than it's displaced. So if you believe it's going to create more jobs than it's displaced, please put your hands in the air. Oh boy. Okay, so and we've got 4 panelists who think, and sorry, keep them up, sorry. And I'm going to go with a weak third of the room there. And hands up if you believe the opposite, that AI will destroy more jobs than it creates by, yes, okay. So that's a good, strong 2/3 of the room. Sorry, I didn't get my hand up in time, but that's where I'm coming from.
Destroy is such a strong word, too.
Destroy. I actually wrote displace, and that is actually the accurate word, but one has to dramatize a little bit. Pew Research has actually done some research in America on this very topic, has asked this very same question. 72% of the American population, which was more or less what we saw, I think, here, are fearful of the impact of this technology on their jobs. About 25% of those describing themselves as extremely worried. About 33% are enthusiastic about the technology. I just want to make one point about that, which is the reason we should be all very excited about the technology. I mean, and when we get to this topic, we're really talking about how do we optimistically frame this new technology. This technology can be amazing. It could really, really liberate us from all the sort of drudgery and toil. It could create a different kind of society. It could be instrumental in shaping a much better existence for us all. In the longer term, I think everybody's concerns are that in the short term it's going to be a bloodbath. And not to put just going to use drama words tonight, that it'll be rough. The displacement will be a little bumpy. Let's put it that way. So one of the studies that got all this going was a study out of Oxford in 2013 with Carl Osborne. Frey and Osborne is the paper, and it actually did a look at American jobs. 700 occupations were in the survey. They estimated that 47% of those jobs would be gone by 2030. They were susceptible to computerization, as they called it. There's been lots of studies like this, McKinsey Global Institute, the World Economic Forum. Lots of people have chimed in with different numbers on this. Some think the impacts will be more pernicious in advanced economies where there's actually more incentive to automate, and because of the high standards of living we have. Others think that the effects will be worse elsewhere. So it's clearly a topic that's on everybody's mind. I wanted to just frame the conversation slightly there in terms of we're going to try to anchor it on sort of jobs, the future of employment, and as that relates to AI. And maybe one of the questions that could get us going, AJ, is to, given the Stanford report, which looked at the year 2030 very much in terms of the impacts of AI, are all the jobs going to go away? So maybe you could just sort of paint a picture of 2030 and give us a sense of how it's impacted employment.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to the panel. And I think the short answer is, in my opinion, no. But I'm going to give the long answer now. What we tried to do in the Stanford report is actually we were doing predictions for the 2030, but we did it by looking at the history, looking like last 10 years, trying to understand what has really happened in our field, and using that insight to make predictions about the future. So then I'm going to take a minute to kind of tell you my idea of what is really going on, because I think that is useful for setting up the story about like what the effect of AI is going to be in our society and the workforce. So machine learning, in particular, in a subfield in artificial intelligence, is a field that people have been working on for the last like 20, 30 years, so it's not completely new. 3 factors came together, in my opinion, in the last 10 years, in the last decade, to create the successes that we are seeing in the press. The number 1 factor in this, and I think it's the biggest ingredient of all the successes we see in artificial intelligence, is the high-quality data. We are having an explosion in the availability of data that AI systems can learn from. And I particularly like one statistics in this space that I've seen, which is 90% of all data that is created in our civilization since we learned how to write has been created in the last 2 years. That shows us what kind of an explosion we are having in terms of how much data we have in our data centers for AI algorithms to get their hands to. The second factor that's really important is when you have this much data, you need a lot of processing power, and we have more processing power. And with these 2 factors coming together, some actually well-known techniques like neural networks are not working very well. These techniques didn't come, to our world in the last few years. It's just now they are working very well. It is important to know, though, what kind of problems these techniques work very well for. They work well if the task at hand is repetitive, there is a lot of data for it, and the AI systems are functioning kind of in a closed environment where a lot of the world dynamics can be modeled very easily by the AI system through data. But there are actually a lot of things in the world that doesn't fit into this category. Right? We as humans deal with a lot of situations that are kind of open-ended, that don't have a clear objective function that we can model in the system, where we run into situations where we don't have a lot of previous experience about, and we use our creativity and complex problem solving for figuring out these situations. Our AI techniques right now are not there yet. I'm not saying people can, a lot of very smart people are working in the field, right? Maybe there are going to be some breakthroughs that are going to bring us there before 2030. It's just we are not there yet. So basically, there are a lot of problems that humans are good at that machines are still not. So in terms of job replacement, there are clearly some jobs out there that are more repetitive, right, that we have a lot of data for. Driving is a nice example. Although it is not completely closed world, and we are trying to deal with the open world consequences of it, ordering food at a fast food restaurant, these are things that there's a lot of repetition about, or bringing packages in a warehouse. It's a closed world environment. Factories, closed world. These kind of places, I'm personally expecting a lot of automation to happen. However, if we study what our jobs really entail day to day, it is actually not a single task. It is a composition of many types of tasks. And I believe some of the tasks that are repetitive, there is a lot of easy data to collect about, those are going to be automated by systems. But the more interesting, challenging, complex, creative parts of our jobs are going to be still there. But what is going to be happening is that we are going to be working a lot with AI systems, who is going to be taking care of some of the repetitive stuff and doing things that AI is good at, and leaving room for us to do the things that we are really, really interested in and challenged by. That is my view.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the spirit of optimism we're looking for. Try to hold on to that, Caesar. Do you have a conflicting point of view or a complementary point of view?
That's not fair. You know I have. To me, the key point of the question is actually putting an year there, right? Like to 2030. It's very hard to predict with that precision. But when I look at the future of work and like the displacement and what's going to happen, I do believe we need to look from different areas of study. And I'm talking about looking at the historical data, the sociology, the economic impact, right? Like the end technology, right? Bring all those. And we have lessons learned. And when you look at all the industrial revolutions, like the previous 3 that we had, we can learn some patterns there. So one that I totally agree with AJ here is to say in the long run, and that's hard to say 2030, in the long run, the jobs have been actually created at a faster pace and with better quality because the technology free us from like the toil, from like carrying rocks or whatever we can name it here. So the jobs are better quality and in bigger numbers. What is not fun is for like us living that transition, and that is hard, and that brings us to have a big discussion here to say, how do we handle that? Because like the first 2 industrial revolutions, they took place in 100 years each. The third one, actually, it was 55 years. In the best possible conservative way to look at this 4th one that we've been through, those are 25 years. So that would be a lot of people unemployed. I not agree with AJ on saying that artificial intelligence is going to be limited to repetitive tasks. I think that actually just the next 10 years. But as AI kept being developed to be a true artificial intelligence, they will outskill humans in most more areas. And that might be another time to talk about the new jobs.
Yeah. So Dan, perhaps back to the here and now. You're an engineer working at Google on these kinds of systems. I mean, help us understand some of the ethical challenges around the design and implementation of these systems. I'm particularly interested in, deep learning networks that are based on biased data and how that kind of colors the discipline of artificial intelligence, but also the impact.
Yeah, so there's a saying in our industry that AI is 20 years away, but that we've been saying this since 1945. So I take a kind of nuanced view, but the ethical perspective has been changing. So in my career working on AI for the past 20 years, we didn't think about ethics in this because we thought we're just doing science and engineering, so we're not biased, or we don't have to think about ethics. That's someone else's job. We're just doing engineering. We're just solving a problem, and problems are neutral. And what you've seen, especially in the past 6 months to a year, is that dialogue changing, that we are responsible for the consequences of these things we create. And something that comes from crossover of communities where, ethicists have been around for a long time, and anthropologists and people who study these things, and those communities are intersecting now, and that is driving some of the way we behave. But the problems are complex, and they're multinational. So if you look at YouTube gets a lot of criticism for having all kinds of videos and suggesting all kinds of videos. But what it suggests to you, what's offensive or inappropriate, can vary widely. And companies, I think, in the past wanted to take a neutral stance to say we're freedom of speech, whatever, we're neutral. But you increasingly see that we are taking a stance. So was it last week or 2 weeks ago, Oren Etzioni from AI2 and Brad Smith, who's the general counsel of Microsoft, and Harry Shum, who's the president of AI at Microsoft, they proposed this thing called the Hippocratic Oath for AI practitioners. And that's really about this idea of sharing that Hippocratic Oath of first do no harm, right? Put humans before machines. It's not about technology, it's always about humans. I think that's what we need to realize, that AI is a tool that's used by humans. But it's the crazy thing is how well it scales, right? And so we have to pay attention to that. And so we do see these biases, and we're learning more about how things are biased in sometimes very subtle ways that are not obvious, but are very important. And so as we learn more, we can start to measure, and we're big on measurement in tech, right? If we can measure it, we can track it. And so these things are converging, and I think that's positive for everyone.
Can I say one thing?
Yeah.
I agree with what Dan was saying. Our company did a survey last year for about 700 C-level executives, and we found that about 89% of them had to deal with some form of ethical question that they had to, or dilemma, dealing with some sort of smart or artificial intelligence technologies, but about 87% of them didn't have the tools that they needed to be able to figure out what they needed to do. As we've been sort of listening to what our customers are kind of asking us about, we just formed in November of last year just an internal ethics committee within Avanade that has different people from sitting across our business. One, for us to actually think about what we need to do internally. We've taken some of the pillars of that from Brad and Harry from the book that they created, but are putting sort of our own spin on that as well. But also then being able to start to advise our clients on that too, because we feel that someone's got to start talking about it, and you got to start bringing those discussions to the forefront.
Actually, Aaron, I'll stay with you. I mean, you're right there listening to customers who are trying to automate parts of their workforce and retrain and reskill parts of their workforce. Tell us what's going on there. Give us some examples, perhaps, of the kinds of things you're seeing pressure to do.
Yeah, so, as AJ said, sort of artificial intelligence has a wide definition, and there's lots of different technologies that underpin it. I would say, our customers at the end of the day are sort of large corporations, sort of Fortune 500, Fortune 1000, and there are varying levels of maturity of where they're actually at today and the things that they're trying to do. And I would say the majority are at the beginning of trying to understand how they utilize the technology, and most of it is to what AJ said around manual and repetitive tasks, and how do you actually automate those today. Our view is really trying to work with our customers as they're trying to figure out how they actually do that automation. So think about invoice processing, claims for an insurance, where you've got people that are kind of doing these manual things today. You can actually have the machine not just look at what's coming in on the claim, can actually understand the intent of what's in the text there. If it has an image on it of a check or whatever, you can actually understand and pull that information out. And so things where humans before were kind of looking and doing that, you're now having those displaced a little bit. There are some companies that are doing that because they see an ROI as part of it. What we try to coach them on, and our belief is that there's this notion of augmentation, of where you've got a human and the machine kind of working together, and together those create sort of a superhuman. And that's sort of where we believe we're trying to get to at some point. There will always be the automation that's going to come, but how do you get these two to work together? Probably the best example I can give you, I don't know if anyone's heard of Stitch Fix, or is a customer of Stitch Fix, but they basically, instead of going to a store and buying your clothing, you sign up, you give them a bunch of information about yourself, you go on Pinterest and you kind of pick different styles that you're interested in, and then they send you a box that a stylist has said, these are clothes that you might be interested in. And what they're doing is they're pairing the algorithms that are being created of the data that you have fed them, but they actually have a human stylist that's in there as well, looking at what you have said, having a conversation with you, and playing together in sort of this interesting dance that then has a feedback loop of, hey, they sent you these clothings, you maybe didn't like 2 of them, you're telling the system that, you're also then changing the styles you want on your Pinterest board, and it's kind of this endless loop that's going back. But we see that in industry and industry over again, of how do you think about doing that not just within retail, but how do you do it within manufacturing and the like?
Yeah, Caleb, obviously I wanted to acknowledge that between us setting up this event and tonight, there has been obviously news for Uber, and I just wanted to just give you a second to quickly address that, just outside of the context. It's related to the topic tonight, but it's really not about the topic tonight.
Sure. As you all probably have all seen in the news, there was a terrible accident in Tempe, Arizona, late Sunday night involving one of our self-driving vehicles. And it was a very tragic death of a woman that was crossing the street. The investigation is underway. Our focus so far has been cooperating with investigators and reaching out to the victim's family and seeing what we can do to offer our condolences and anything on that front. I do believe that the investigation, the results of the investigation will really determine what the long-term impact of this is. There's been a lot of news and a lot of hyperbole over the past couple days. That said, I think you are seeing some saner voices come out, and they will hopefully prevail as, again, the facts do really ultimately become available after the investigation is completed. So.
Yeah, but perhaps you could sort of expand. Obviously, Uber has big plans for the automation of driving and delivery services of all kinds. That's probably the most clear-cut example that everybody can think of as being the sort of, well, once that really happens, assuming it does happen in some near-term future, we will truly know that this wasn't just hyperbole. This worry wasn't just existential angst about our futures. This will actually be displacing millions of people. So I'm curious how Uber looks at that and its plans and frames that sort of internally in strategy.
Sure. So I want to start with, I think, what several people up here have noted. Predicting the future is tremendously difficult, right? And we can look to past examples and draw the best information that we can from that. There's always going to be concerns that this time is going to be very different, and it very well could be. So we do have a team of economists and technologists that have really tried to dig in on, okay, what is the impact of, in just this field. I freely admit I'm not as familiar with the breadth of where automation could have an impact. But within the field of transportation, which again, it seems to be the nearest place where large numbers of people could potentially be displaced, our economists, based on sort of what we certainly hope to see in the evolution of cities and the evolution of personal transportation, we do not see massive job losses or massive displacement in the near future. Now, once you get out 50, 100 years, I think it's, again, the complexity of predicting what the future looks like at that point is even more complex. But as we look over the next 10, 15, 20 years, certainly, we actually see an increase in the number of opportunities to earn money driving on a for-hire basis, both in the trucking industry and in the personal transportation. And part of that, I can just jump through them quickly. On the personal transportation side, it will come, we believe, because personal car ownership is going to become less and less of an a smart economic thing to do. And as people do that, the need for people to use alternate forms of transportation, thus hiring other people or using an autonomous vehicle, is going to increase exponentially. So you're already seeing this in our downtown cores. As we continue to grow, we have seen tremendous growth in suburban areas, and we project that even with the introduction of autonomous vehicles in certain areas, that the need for human drivers is going to continue to expand on the personal transportation side. Trucking side is actually similar in that where we see displacement, and as several people have noted, displacement is painful, and I don't want to minimize the extent to which any of these transitions may be painful, not only for the people going through them, but for society as a whole. But there will be probably a decrease in the need for long-haul truckers because that is the first most obvious place, in some ways even to the automation side. It is the most closed environment that you're going to find yourself in that's sort of in the real world. A highway, going 70 miles an hour, 65 miles an hour, right? You're not dealing with the complexities of navigating a city street, and the autonomous technology is more likely to be able to be deployed in an economically viable way there as quickly as possible. However, that is going to drive down the cost of shipping because the vehicle is going to be able to use it more efficiently, which is going to increase the need for the short haul truckers. And the studies that we've done, we actually project an increase in the number of truckers, upwards of 750,000 truckers over the next 15 years, as there's an increase in need for short haul trucking. So I share this more just in that I think, at least in the transportation side, it is going to be a far more complex and long-term transition that happens, and not this sort of abrupt, one day you've got a whole bunch of people that are out there earning money driving, and then within 2 years, suddenly there's no need because it's just autonomous vehicles. And for a whole number of reasons, we just don't see that happening that way. And so for the foreseeable future, we see augmentation, not supplementation.
And Cesar, do you want to just I see you wriggling there.
Yeah, actually agitating in the chair, yeah. I always think that Moore's law has responded a lot to how fast technology develops. And there's no doubt, if you look at 10 years ago, for example, we didn't have the iPhone yet. It was coming out, and where we are today. If you look at 10 years ahead, since we have like the embryos of artificial intelligence now where you're gonna be, this is pretty much my puzzling, right? Like, and if you look at 20 years, I think that's gonna be a full development at the best. But what's very important for us to look at, what human beings and humankind has not been great, is on actually having the ethical and moral discussions ahead of technology development. We fail on that on every single case of technology. If you look at like back on the First World War, it's like airplanes. Okay, first thing, let's bomb our neighbors. Then we think on commercial lines. Nuclear power, let's not go there. Like, it's really bad. If you look at social networking, oh, finally you realize there's a power to change elections, there's a power to actually our kids be addicted to, and now let's have a discussion if we should have like free, if we should actually control Chapter 230 and all the discussions around that. So artificial intelligence is not different from that. This is gonna be fast. Economic interest comes first, and you, like as human beings, we need to be sure that we take that seriously and have the ethics and the moral discussion now. Because like artificial intelligence at full deployment is way more dangerous than nuclear power. That's my...
I think, go ahead.
Yeah. Where do we go with that, EJ?
Okay, it's heating up, that's good. I'm gonna agree with you on one point and disagree with you on one point. Yeah. So I think one point I want to make is that AI as a technology is not this miraculous thing that you just feed data, it does the great thing, it is so good that it solves all the problems and it's gonna speed up so fast. As a person who is trying to build these systems, it is actually very hard to build AI systems that can work successfully in the real world. A lot of the successes we hear about AI are about these lab environments where you are playing games, where you are working on static data sets and you're showing great results on existing data sets. However, it is when you get to the real world, when you get a little bit about outside of the training data that you have, you see how easy it is for these algorithms to break down. I just don't want to create an impression that all of the great articles you see about AI gives the impression that it's going to be so fast for these algorithms to master everything else, because I don't believe that. That's the part I'm going to disagree. The part I'm going to agree, though, is that because our algorithms are so fragile and they make mistakes so easily, it is why it is so important to have the ethical discussions, because if you put imperfect AI systems into the real world without the right supervision on them, they can actually make a lot of mistakes and then create problems. The bias problems we talk about, the reliability, safety, trustworthiness, they are all because our AI systems are not perfect. And for a very long time, they are going to be making mistakes.
Dan,
this is great commentary. I think one thing about having the ethical discussion is I think you should look to artists and poets and these people who have a different way of viewing the world, and they often perceive that they're ahead of the curve in perceiving. And so we, as a general public, we tend to have the debate too late, but it's somewhat because we're not listening to the people who are seeing the possibilities. So I think that's one thing I've learned. I volunteer teaching computer science, so it's all about STEM, but the arts also need to be valued, and we do need to celebrate those people's contribution and look to them for guidance.
Yeah, Dan, I might just follow up though. Whose responsibility is it to do the ethical testing? Is it? I mean, you acknowledged in your intro there that suddenly we were engineers, we were scientists, we were doing it because it was to prove it could be done, and now there's a conversation about our responsibility being sort of on us. These conversations are well timed, to your point, Caesar. But is it your responsibility solely as an engineer to think this stuff through, or I'm curious because we do seem to encounter, I mean, increasingly quite a lot of situations where the ethics have not been thought through. These things were deployed into the world half-baked at best, and then clearly, nobody was having a conversation about ethics or where the data was coming from, or the fact that there was not good representation in the data, which just seem like basic engineering questions, not even ethical questions, just sort of we didn't really do our basic homework. And so I'm curious whose responsibility is it to sort of force the engineers or check the deployment or sort of gatekeep on when it is responsible to push this technology out into the world?
Well, talk about responsibility is a nebulous thing. It is our responsibility as engineers to put the right in quotes, but to care about these ethics and to care about monitoring our systems and guessing and evaluating the impact. But it's everyone's responsibility to hold everyone accountable. So you do see the governments or companies using AI or some subset of AI, and then you have an organization that says, hey, wait, have you thought about how this impacts this community? Have you thought about how that impacts that community? By the way, we're experts in that community. So bringing their voices to the table is important. So accountability is really this network, right? And as I mentioned before, I think that network is growing, and those conversations are happening, but it does take time. And I think to AJ's point about AI, the AI is not this thing that just comes in and takes over the world. It's often done in research labs where we have some data set and we say, hey, I improved it by this much, and then I write a giant press release about it. But it doesn't take into account the real world, for example. So hey, I can recognize images. I can describe these images in this set really well. I know I can tell a cat from a dog 99% of the time. And then someone's like, hey, what about this cat? What happens if I put a black diamond over here and it suddenly says it's a whale? So it's up to all of us to push the boundaries, and some of that comes back to the engineering to say, I need to make that pushing the boundaries available to everyone. So you do see this with Microsoft and Google, and I'm sure there's other examples with other companies of saying, hey, take my AI and do something with it, and let me make it easy, at least as easy as we can make it, and we're trying, right? It's hard. To let people test those boundaries. So the responsibility is on everyone, but it's also on engineering to let other communities in and let people push those boundaries and hold us accountable.
Aaron?
I agree. I think we also have to keep the perspective. We're still, even though the AI technology has been around since the late 40s, we are in the early days, and so there's going to be fumbles, and there's going to be things that we're going to forget to do. But I agree that it's incumbent on us to have the discussion, and as corporations and companies to be able to stand up and say, this is how we should be thinking about doing it. I don't mean to fast forward us too much, but I think there's an opportunity here that we see with companies, with just where AI is going, of companies have to it's going to transform the way that companies actually will work and operate today. And just like we've had disruption from the past, you're going to have companies that will be slow and not change, and then you're going to have others that will adapt and do change. And I think part of who's the responsibility fall on, there needs to be new roles and new types of jobs that are created. So there maybe is not, yes, the engineer needs to check his code. He needs to make sure that there's something else that they're doing that's not going to cause a problem and that there's not bias in the system. But maybe there needs to be some sort of ethicist that's involved that then is actually going through and doing a double check, like an ethics compliance officer or something like that. So there's new jobs and new training that has to happen that will need to be put in place, and those forward-thinking companies are going to do that. And I think that's also sort of where the responsibility lies.
Yeah, good point. Cesar, perhaps you could take us in a slightly different direction with the nature, and I'll open this up to the whole panel, the nature of the kinds of jobs that will be more resilient. What are the sort of qualities that machine learning is going to have the hardest time sort of displacing? And maybe take it from the perspective of an education.
Absolutely. So there's one quote that I like a lot that says, if you go like fast forward like in the future and look at the jobs, there will be two kinds of jobs. The people that will be telling computers what to do or teaching computers what to do, and people that will be told by computers what to do. There's nothing in between. There's a chasm there. I love that quote because that actually, to me, mirrors a lot of the reality in terms of eliminating those low-level decision-making that AJ just explained. But when you look at those two ends, to me, becomes clear that on the third industrial revolution, we were all about being productive. So we actually increased productivity to entire new levels. And we measure people by their productivity level. And that pushed people to be more computers than people, to be more automate than actually computers. What actually the fourth industrial revolution is bringing is actually a way to put computers to be productive and do what computers have to do, and humans to be more humans. Amazing. So we have a chance to actually go back and discuss ethics, morals, and care about each other. So when you look at the jobs growing today, and there's a tendency to go in that level, what I call the caring industry. It's about like social care, health care, beauty care, jobs where we have human touch. When humans take care of each other, this is a big trend in terms of growth. On the other end of the spectrum, it's really like higher education jobs, right? To say in terms of multiple skills, like people that get educated and prepared to solve like bigger problems. And that will require probably more years of study, more depth of study, and it goes in that direction. That's the general answer.
Does anyone else want to contribute to that? I might just sort of add, I think it's sometimes been characterized, the first three industrial revolutions were about physical displacement, like we were sort of mechanizing human physical labor. And this one is about cognitive labor being displaced, and I think that's just a nice simple frame to think about the difference between why economists sometimes don't see why this time it's different. Not to condemn all economists, there are certainly economists on both sides of this argument, but a lot of economic arguments are based on the history of what has happened in industrial revolutions, which is over the long term, there's been, as you said, this valley, and we came through it the other side, and look at us, we're all near full employment here. And so therefore, it must be true that we will just create all sorts of new fantastic jobs we can't even think of over the next few years. I just want to sort of point to that argument a little bit and say that actually the data suggests that there's only, I believe, 10% of professions that were not around 100 years ago. The ability for society to actually sort of create all sorts of magical new opportunities for people is actually much more limited than people think, or at least it has been historically, to use my economics argument against me. But so there is actually, I think, this good evidence as to why there actually will be displacement, and not to point at Uber specifically as the single cause of It's good to hear your economists see all sorts of opportunity, and it will be messy, I think, in terms of the reality of how these things play out is never as clear-cut or as doomsday scenario as any prediction would give you. But I do want to look at, let's say there will be long-distance truckers put out of work. Whose responsibility is it to take care of that? I mean, is it Uber's? Or as a company, do you think it's you have to do something about that? Or is there a way to design the technology to be more an augmenting a human versus replacing a human? Is there any incentive to do that? And I'll add to the question, is Uber concerned that it will be a poster child for this displacement at some level, like that's part of the plan, kind of thing, you know? Yeah.
So yeah, a lot to chew on there. I guess I would start by saying that just in general, I don't think companies can be agnostic to ethical issues anymore. I would agree with the rest of the panel. And I think that's been a big change. And I think where you see companies really stumble today is when they try and say, "Oh, we're just a business and we're sitting back and we just do business." And that doesn't work anymore. And as the way that humans communicate with each other continues to go down the path that it's going down, where it's this very self-reinforcing networks of communication as opposed to one single set of facts, that I think is only going to expedite. So even if just for pure economic reasons, and again, that's not the only reason that I personally believe that companies should be involved, but speaking just from a purely like survival and success of a business, I think businesses are going to have to take some responsibility. And Uber being one of them. We frequently cite that, we are a very, very tiny part of the quote-unquote independent contractor gig economy world, but we are the face. And for that reason, we have some responsibility to be thinking about these issues, to be working with, and I think to your point, it is everybody, right? But it's engaging the entire community, the communities that we work in, to come up with solutions that make sense. And so what we're doing at Uber is trying to start that conversation, right? And I think we don't know exactly where that leads. Like, what is the responsibility? How does that work? I think it's not solely corporate, though. I mean, it's going to have to be a partnership with government. It's going to have to be a partnership with the other parts of our society, our civic society. And so I think it's going to have to take the form of everything from policy changes, where it becomes easier for people to transition between jobs. Like, what are those barriers? How do we break down those barriers? It's something that, again, out of the immediate topic of this, but something like a portable benefits system, where people are able to move from job to job much more seamlessly, and that the loss of their job doesn't throw them into danger of one illness landing them in bankruptcy. Right? I mean, that would be a fundamental change, and that doesn't exist today. And it would. I believe that there's things that we as a society could do to change that are beyond just the corporations, and not necessarily excusing Uber or any other corporation from the consequences of their actions, but that it's going to have to be a group effort.
Yeah, go ahead, Aaron.
I've been thinking about the same thing, and I do think that there's a conversation, and I don't know where it starts or how it begins, but kind of public, private, but I do think we're going to start to see some leading corporations that step forward, and they're going to do it, one, because they need to do it from survival perspective, but at the same time, they're doing it because it attracts new labor and talent that they're going to need in sort of this war that we're at to find the good people that we need to do for the jobs. I think AT&T is a great example of this. AT&T has their own internal study that they did where they found that in the next 10 years, like 100,000 people of their 250,000 employees are going to be out of a job because the technology that they're using today, which is kind of putting in the copper lines, no one really needs to do that stuff anymore. So all these people that are trained, what are they going to do with them? And so they partnered with the Georgia Institute of Technology and are basically taking their employees and paying to put them through schooling to be retrained. So you're getting these people who previously were laying copper and now are becoming data scientists, which is what they need in kind of the new realm.
So I think my caution on that, and again, I love those partnerships, and I think it's the kind of thing that we at Uber are like talking about, how we open opportunities for the drivers that work on our platform, among others. But you know, if I have to hear another like coal miner into like programmer story, like I also think we have to be realistic about like what these transitions are, and you know, retraining somebody in their mid-50s to do something fundamentally different than what they've ever done before has proven, there's been a lot of great efforts to do it, has proven to be incredibly challenging. And so being realistic about like what is it what are the opportunities that can be created for people, and how do we do that?
Yeah, AJ, I wanted to, if you would pick this up. I think the expression that the AI revolution will be colorblind, you know, neither blue collar or white collar will be immune to the disruption has been bandied around. I think it's a useful frame because it's really nothing to do with education level. It's more to do with sort of repetitiveness in your job. And you touched on this at the intro, but maybe you could pick up on how is it likely that it's not going to be one day there's a software program that does your job. It's not going to be as clear-cut as that. It's actually going to be a little bit different, and maybe you could just explain how it probably will show up.
One thing we've been all talking about is actually augmentation. AI augmenting people and AI working with people. And I think the number one challenge we are going to face in the field is how do we really build AI systems that can be useful for people, that can work effectively with them. Because this is actually a challenge that goes beyond of automating tasks that we are good at, right? Like partnering with somebody, communicating with somebody, being useful for somebody is not simply automating the tasks they do. You have to communicate, you have to explain yourself, you have to develop trust and so forth. So this challenge of building AI systems that are useful for people is going to be much further than just automating the tasks. And some of the challenges come from the common algorithms we have in the AI field right now. We know that the way AI algorithms and people see things are very different from each other. We have different kind of mental models. We are not making decisions in the same way. Cars right now have cameras, lidars, radars. Humans look with their eyes and see the things in 3D that the way machines don't see. So the way we understand problems are inherently very different. And also on top of this, the current algorithms we have are like these black boxes. Even the people who build these algorithms, you don't understand how these algorithms are going to work. These are all kind of adding challenges for machines and humans working together. And there's some work going on in the space. It's just there needs to be a lot more to figure out these problems together. But at the same time, you know, these machines and humans seeing things differently offer some new interesting opportunities for us as well. Because if we see things differently, we don't make the same mistakes. Last year, there was a challenge problem for like how do we use AI algorithms for helping radiologists or automating the decisions that professional radiologists do. And this was focusing on the breast cancer case. And right now, you know, this kind of comes to your blue collar, white collar problem, because being a professional radiologist is white collar as it gets, but it's a repetitive task. You are looking at images and making diagnosis. So it's actually, even though it's like a white collar job, it's a good candidate for automation. And for this right now, the current deep learning technologies are not at the level that human radiologists are. Human radiologists, you know, board certified, they have around like 3.5% error rate these days. The machine learning algorithms we have could, you know, do like double the error rate, like 7% and so forth. But I think the most important result I've seen from the paper, this is like joint work between MIT and Harvard, that came out last year. They actually gave the AI algorithm in the hands of the radiologist for using it as an assistive technology. So the AI algorithm was showing what it thinks, and the radiologist was adding his or her insights into it. And this methodology reduced the human error rate by 85%. So I think this is like a case where we can actually see benefits from augmentation. If the human and the machine can look at the problem from two different perspectives, but then coordinate on it, then bring their thoughts together. Usually right now, our AI algorithms are not sophisticated enough to do this deliberation. And humans are in the roles of like doing this deliberation, being the error checkers of AI systems, correcting them when they are making mistakes, like you were talking about, Aaron. Even in the cars right now, they are like the safety drivers watching what the cars are doing and providing input. And this is a very productive workflow for us because we are collecting feedback about what our AI systems doing bad or good. So it provides important feedback for our AI systems to get better. But throughout all of this, I think there are a lot of benefits from the AI systems and machine and humans looking at problems from two different perspectives. At the same time, though, if this deliberation is not done well, then there are problems, and that's, you were mentioning some of the legal justice system AI automation cases, and there, these issues are not really well thought of, and that's where a lot of the bias discussions were coming from. So this is something, the interaction between the human and the machine working together is something we definitely have to get right.
Dan, do you want to take us in a slightly different direction here? Assuming there is all sorts of fallout in this next 15-year period, and perhaps towards the end of it, we're starting to really see the evidence mount that there is significant amounts of displacement going on in the economy. What do we do? How do we organize society? Think about a whole class of people who are essentially being made redundant in the sense, and perhaps the opportunities for them are not great in terms of their ability to get back into the workforce at a higher level or in a non-repetitive or creative occupation. What do we do there? And I'm just curious if you have some thoughts on that.
Thanks. I want to follow on what AJ said about humans and AI working together. So we did talk about, well, we sort of beat around the bush about the sentencing software that was quite controversial 2 years ago. But there was some recent work from out of John Clammer's at Harvard, right? Or Cornell, sorry. Cornell, yeah. So they found that by using AI to assign court cases, you could reduce the prison population by 42%, and without increasing the crime rate. Right? That's huge. I mean, we have a massive prison population in the United States, but that's humans and AI working together and actually overcoming the human bias. So I'll leave that and switch to what you're saying. So let me not predict, but tell you a story, and that's about basic income. So in the tech community, the idea of basic income is quite popular. In fact, it actually dates back to the 16th century. People were proposing basic income as a moral imperative all the way back then, and there have been many experiments over time. You can look these up. A lot of it in the late 20th century, 1970s, all through today in various forms. And I think in the tech community, basic income, that's often our snap answer. Oh, what will happen to all these people? Oh, basic income. We'll all be like playing with our dog on our boat, whatever, because AI is making all the money in Bitcoin, blah, 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 right? That's period, end of comment. Move on to the next question in tech, right? But I think what I've found is that we're not asking the right question. Well, I shouldn't say we because that's generalizing, but many people who have this snap answer, and that including myself, I sort of thought that, basic income, done, right? That's thinking like an engineer sometimes. But recently I've been challenged on that ABI thing, that like ABI is not necessarily like the answer, the blanket answer, and we need to think beyond that, whether it is creating jobs in new ways. And even in America, look at our infrastructure. It's in pretty bad shape, right? 90% of the bridges are about to fall down, and we have a very famous one in Seattle that's basically going to fall down at any moment. But perhaps engineering didn't solve that tunnel boring machine very well. We could have used some AI, perhaps. So anyway, yeah, I mean, think creatively, right? Think about how we can put people to work, and again, engage community. There are people who have good ideas about this, especially with work retraining. If you look at preventing prison recidivism, right? Training and getting people back in the workforce is a huge benefit to bringing people back and preventing future crime from people, because they don't really want to do it. It's a symptom of a whole systemic problem. And so we need to think systemically, not just propose ABI, done. Right.
Yeah, I guess I would just add, I mean, I think all of these conversations need to happen with the backdrop of a dramatically changing workforce. And again, Uber being a bit of the poster child for this gig economy idea. But if you look at the statistics on the growth of people that are working as independent contractors and working in an independent capacity and doing multiple jobs as opposed to one employer in a traditional relationship. And so I think that my personal hope is that actually that's going to offer tremendous opportunities for people to transition more gently, to move, to be able to undergo that retraining without having to sort of bear the cost as a society of people completely dropping out, right? Where they literally just go and get retrained, where there's actually going to be ways for people to work and in sort of smaller chunks than just 40 hours a week or not at all. And I think we're already seeing that growth today, and there's no indication that that's going to stop. And I do think that will it will create opportunities. I think it also creates dangers in just that there's been a breakdown of the relationship, the traditional employer-employee relationship, that is going to impact what this displacement looks like and how we respond as a society.
That's great. So I want to actually give you guys a chance to ask questions. And so if you have a question, please line up at one of the two mics in the front. I guess, of course. All right,
this is great. Normally nobody asks
questions. We'll start over here. I just wanted to couple thoughts on the questions. If you want to target this at a specific person, obviously, or the whole panel, just introduce yourself, say hello, and try to keep it to a question. Not your thesis or your rambling thoughts about the topic. Please point it as quickly as you can to a question.
Hi, my name is Meetham, and I spent the majority of my career in government and now and more in startups and tech. And so my question is really, what is the role of government, from candidates who are campaigning to policies, from cities to states to the federal government, and also civil society in this? Because it's, a lot of you are kind of in tech or trying to be the bridge. And I also think that government needs to move at a speed of innovation as well at this point. So what are your hopes, and what do you think the role of governing and policy is in all of this, as well as nonprofits, as this region is very abundant in that as well. So what's the role?
I can jump in on that and assume others will as well. Government, depends on what level you're talking about, right? But we live in a very global society, right? And that it's not, certainly in the transportation field, right? If we don't do it, honestly, somebody in China is moving on it faster than we are, and maybe faster than we are, even if we're trying to do it at the same time. And so that has to be a backdrop, and something that government, I think, recognizes, that you're actually, you can slow things down, but you're probably not going to stop it. So the role of government in being a convener, in bringing communities together and encouraging a fact-based debate and a thoughtful conversation to reach good answers is, for me, what government can do to develop policies that are actually going to help steer us in the right direction, encourage positive norms, like all of the ethical consideration and the ethical priorities that I think people focused on up here already, but being realistic along the way, and that's sometimes a challenge for government.
Can I just adding on that? I think that was brilliant. I believe any government at any level needs to look at now and see that technology is actually creating more social inequality. What's not desirable. This is bad for every one of us. So we need to have some regulations, some policies, and some discussions, open discussions, on how to actually reverse that and create more social equity. might be through education, might be looking like in different ways and creative ways to actually reverse that trend. Education is my big one to say like we need to reskill and upskill like the entire population in 20 years, otherwise that can get bad. So just to say, in any level, I think there's a role there, and one of them is social equity. The second one is to actually find ways to stimulate competition, because every time more technology is concentrated in fewer hands. That's super important, because a big chunk of jobs in the future are going to be entrepreneur jobs. So those are my two answers.
AJ, do you want to just add quickly?
I just want to add that sometimes rushed regulation can actually result in adverse outcomes. And if technology people and the people who are producing the regulations are not working together and do not understand what the state of the technology is, it's not producing good results. There is some regulation coming from European Union these days, GDPR, General Data Regulation. In that, we are seeing that there are some clauses that are put there with very good intent, but in terms of solving the issues, it can actually work in adverse ways. One thing we are seeing this is biases. Biases and the private data collection is one thing that I personally worry about. It is very good to care about privacy and not say, like, don't collect private data from people. However, when those data, like gender, race, kind of properties are not collected, bias detection becomes impossible for AI systems. So it's like a whole ecosystem of technologies that need to work together, and creating a regulation thinking only about privacy can actually create adverse results for another problem we really care about. So it's actually a hard problem.
Keep going. Let's get another question.
Co-auditor, I agree with the AI augmenting human and making a superhuman and bringing a lot of benefit that I can understand and agree with. But we didn't really talk about ownership of AI or technologies, right? And that's actually becoming a capital investment from the employer. And last 30 years or so, employee share of GDP or company revenue is going down and down and down. Combining AI or some other technologies with human being, and human being is basically teaching AI, training AI to be more smarter and smarter. Is that gonna pressure companies to pay less to the employees, do you think?
Yeah, it's a great question. Anybody want to touch that one?
Well, AI, this is a lot of AI, especially in things where you need humans to answer the question to train, is built on human labor. And we have platforms that allow us to do what we call microtasking. So I give you a picture and I say, is it a cat? And then you say yes, and you get paid 2 cents or something like that. And you do it over and over. Or you might have seen something that says, I'm not a robot, and it says, click on the things that are street signs. And you're like, oh my God, what is street sign? I don't know. Right? That's you doing labor for the AI. So it's already happening. And yeah, we didn't talk about wealth inequality, but just like any technology is always a scale factor, and scale factors, I think, can contribute to inequality. So it is worthwhile having the discussion. I don't know how, if we can have AI collectives that create value, that would be fascinating. I'd be curious to hear more about that.
That's an inherent mission of any business to be profitable. And we cannot blame any business because that's exactly what we want them to be, right? As the stakeholders, that's what they need to be. So the economic pressure is going to be always there. And if actually laying off employees is a way to be more profitable, they have a more obligation to that stakeholders to do it. So that pressure is going to always be there. If you look at the job market from 1974 to 2008, the number of middle-class jobs eliminated, and it's like huge. It's about like a third of the workforce was replaced by part-time jobs and like less quality jobs. So this is real. This is happening. That's irreversible. The question is, how do you actually invest on social equity to prepare this generation to do something better in that future. What's absolutely very hard to predict, but we need to embrace that journey.
Next question.
I'm glad that Dan mentioned that the employees, they're not employees, they're human beings that give the input that AI depends on are paid 2 cents. And I noticed there's very little 2 cents from the drivers. I don't see anyone on the panel who's a long-haul trucker or other employee or Uber driver. I'm pleased that there is a dialogue going on between Uber and its employees, but I noticed that you reacted, and all of these companies tend to react to any self-organizing by employees with the same array of anti-union tactics and consultants and lawyers and the Freedom Foundation, as occurred to me when a group of employees who work for a private ESL school tried to organize.
Question.
The question is, where are the, will you be willing to actually engage with the Teamsters and your employees who actually work for you and not just react to fight them on that and resist that? And the other thing is, since you had an excellent point about the infrastructure, that would create millions of blue-collar jobs, but it means that someone, especially in tech, has to pay the taxes to pay for that infrastructure program, which I think there's great enthusiasm for, even from some mouth music from the president.
Cool. So let's deal with the.
Sure. I mean, we have been very open about a willingness to talk with anybody, and have embarked on a significant campaign to improve the driver experience, and that is an ongoing effort, and something that, whether it's in the driver sphere or in any sort of other number of topics we've talked about tonight, I think our new CEO has been very, very openly committed to participating in those discussions and being a thought leader on that.
Fantastic.
Can I just correct the record on the 2 cents thing? It's not that we are paying 2 cents. That was an exemplar price. But, we do, in our community, especially in the research community, we are saying we should be paying minimum wage to these crowd workers. So when you want to have the crowd labor do this, figure out what the prevailing minimum wage is in their locale and pay them that, and that's important. And as a grad student, you may not know that, and it's important to know. So your IRB may want to hold you accountable, or your company. So.
My name is Mike, and I'll identify as a capitalist, so I'm about to ask a question that even I don't want to really ask, and that is, can we become too efficient? Can an economy, can our processes, can our situations become so efficient that we have to actually later inject inefficiency back into the system? So as an example would be, say, when I was in the 80s, when I was hearing about Japan, they were going to clean our clock. We were told about how a fish would come in early in the morning, sit on the dock, not move, but change hands 5 times in order to give 5 companies opportunity to have a living. So the question is, we're ruthless on efficiency. We're ruthless to the point of, can we be overdoing it? And as to the person flipping burgers, they might actually be enjoying that. So it might be repetitious, it might be easy to reproduce by computer, but by going after that level first, are we picking the easy fruit and becoming too efficient early? And ABI, or the basic income, would be another way of injecting inefficiency back into the system.
Our capitalist.
Come on, capitalists.
So I like the way you think.
I thought you would answer.
Yeah, no, I like the way you think. But I don't think there's any way back to say, like, let's inject inefficiencies back in the system for us to have something to do. I actually, if we have a work week of 10 hours, maybe we will enjoy that, right? And that's a trend. If you look in Europe, some of the rich countries that actually have like 35 hours a week and considering actually going down. So I don't believe that there's a way back of that. But what I strongly believe is the human passion, the human dream of actually getting something bigger to do will always exist among us. So that, to me, will create absolutely new jobs, and we might say the next dream might be, I don't know, let's go to another galaxy now instead of Mars, right? Like, so we will always have the dream and the passion to say there's something else to do. And what we actually, it's gonna be pretty cool about that future is we know that there will be a lot of wealth generation with this new wave of technology that will probably gonna boost our dreams like further down. down the road. What we need to do, there not to be like too pink on that future, is to say, how do we actually help every single person displaced to transition to that better future? That's our responsibility today.
I will add the on inefficiency. I mean, you could look at it this way: that an evolving idea of what corporate responsibility is to create shared value for society rather than just profits for the shareholders, rather. So that all stakeholders that are affected by this organization are actually getting some kind of value add, and those could be the environment or the citizen impacted by displacement. If we reframe what the corporate responsibility is legally to shareholders and actually look at stakeholders, people impacted by the various technology, I think organizations can continue to organize around the capitalist model, and as long as we're all honest about the people impacted and we're trying to design the services and systems and products we're doing to benefit as many people as possible. And we really don't just ignore the stakeholder that's marginalized or overlooked or where the system is biased against them. So I really do think you could look at that as inefficiency from a pure capitalist point of view. But it actually is, I think, an emerging idea of can Facebook really get away with this? Can the tech giants really get away with this if they're not really looking at the stakeholders and how people are affected by their policies? Will there be a future for these organizations, really? I mean, I think the people voting with their values is becoming a very real phenomenon for these companies. And just from a risk perspective, just from a capitalist perspective, risk alone, the issues of our time are derailing these organizations quicker than, Uber's been through the ringer in the last couple of years, just for policies and values violations and all sorts of things that, who wants that? Uber doesn't want that. They want to hit the reset button as quickly as possible. Anyway.
Thank you. John Gaunt, I work around AI and healthcare. If you're in your mid-50s, you probably raised some kids and buried some parents, so you know a thing or two about life. But in our current debates about AI, that's not really valued. One question that I have, fast forward to 2030, is how do you see AI changing the way different human generations work with each other? Because right now, I'm just looking at the hair color here, there's more experience with end-of-life decisions than I would put in the entire UW freshman class in computer science right now. So how are the generations going to work together in an environment that's being mediated by AI?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. Anybody feel confident?
Well, my 74-year-old aunt is on, or 80-year-old aunt is on Facebook. So, people do learn to deal. An example from my work is cross-generational communication where grandparents were immigrants and had their native language. Parents are bilingual and the grandchildren speak the native language of the country that the parents emigrated to. And fostering those dialogues between people who can't communicate in the same language, and that's an example of an intergenerational thing. So you do look for opportunities for humans working together. Another example from my work is, can I make a Salish speech recognizer? No, these people can't use Amazon. Salish tribe. If you're just speaking Salish, you cannot speak to Alexa or Google Home or Cortana. But why shouldn't you be able to? Right? We should take that into account. If I'm an older adult and I have a speech impediment, I should be able to talk to these things. So that's part of the diversity. But it gets back to data. I need data from older adults speaking who use a different dialect from 20-somethings that it was trained on. I need to know how well am I doing, and that's a challenge.
A positive answer and a little bit of immersion here is to say I'm actually working on that. Workplace 21, my startup, what I'm investing, has a lot of that, how to bring those different generations together to work productively. But one thing that I say that is very positive is actually, I have never seen one generation that totally agrees with the previous one and say oh, you guys rock, let's just do what you have done. And actually, right? And actually that has been very good for our human evolution to break with patterns and learn new areas and new fields and keep going. So, yeah.
I think, though, there is an ethical problem with respect to generations in the sense that when we are building technology, we have a tendency to build it for the younger generations. And the technology we develop usually reflects the people who develop it. So right now, for example, speech recognition technologies do not work very well for the elderly population because they are not tested on them, they are not developed by them. So bringing awareness that the technology we develop, especially AI technology we develop, have to work for all different groups of our society, and that's our responsibility as a technology company, is an awareness that we should be, as the people building this technology, we should all have it. And if not, and if our technology is really useful for people, that will be another reason why unfairness in our society may increase, and we really don't want that.
Sorry, I'm going to take just 2 more questions, or maybe 3 if they're quick.
I'll try to be as quickly as possible, but Tim sort of stole some of what I was going to, and so did you. Until recently, I was a PhD student who was researching AI, and then I left to go work for an IT consultancy because, long story. Suffice to say, but the thing I got interested in way more than my research was the issue of the social and policy issues surrounding AI. Like, I forget which one of you exactly pointed it out. Like, the first industrial era lasted a century. The second industrial era lasted about a century. The third lasted about 50 years. We're about 25 years. And related to another question about somebody commenting about the nature of government and to act with the speed of innovation. I mean, institutions cannot deal with this rate of change, nor can most people. How do you propose injecting an efficiency, to borrow Tim's term, but at least trying to make it the rate of innovation slow enough that everybody can catch up, from policymakers to everything else? And this is something I'd like to hear from the entire panel.
Yeah, I'm gonna just point at Caesar quickly and say, how do we inject inefficiency into the system? To summarize a little bit.
So, yeah, the only constant in the world is change, right?
Yeah.
Most of our population actually got to a status where you say, okay, we don't need to change all the time. That's great. I have a profession. I have a paycheck. Maybe I can retire on that profession, and then things are stable. That reality is gone. There's no way back. Change is the way to go. New technologies are accelerating. If you look at 10 years ago, you could leave home without a smartphone on your pocket. Now you don't do it anymore. And that's going to accelerate every time more, because that's the nature of
Yeah, but a 55-year-old with 25 to 30 years in an industry can't just let me go learn a new trade.
Right. Can we slow it down is the question, I think, really.
So or at least to deal with the adaptation rate.
I don't believe so.
I
don't believe so. It's just my belief. It's actually we need to absolutely help them transition or live inside that. And we need to prepare everyone to a faster speed change process. There's no way back. There has never been a way back.
I object to the ageism, though, about this 50-year-old bullshit.
Hey. Yeah. Just respecting the time for a second.
Thanks. My name is Roy LaCroix. Question is about public education system, United States. I'm not talking about the world or Europe. The United States public education system. Thinking ahead, was it 2030? Was the date we're bounding around?
2030.
Thinking ahead 11 years. Right, is that right? 12 years. 12 years. How prepared, maybe this wrong, the general working population coming out of public education, that's in public education now, and exiting over the next 12 to 20 years, how prepared will they be? Not the AI students, not the computer science students, but general people coming out of the public education system. How well prepared will they be? And what changes, if any, do we need to start planning for now, because it will take 20 years to get it in? So.
Yeah, I think these conversations, and thank you again to MIT for organizing these, this is the start of that conversation, right? This is people who are concerned about this issue coming together and saying, I don't think the people are going to be ready. I don't think we're going to be able to adapt in time. What ideas do we have about how to adjust and adapt? We need all of the ideas. I think it's like not just one. There's not one big fix. It's how do we move this conversation forward into policy, into action, into a Hippocratic oath for the technologists, and all sorts of ways in which we can act responsibly to sort of potentially slow things down, or at least do it as responsibly as we possibly can. But raising the awareness on this issue, I mean, there's so many existential fears that we all live with in our current climate. Adding another one, I'm fearful that actually people are just slightly deaf to this one. Like it's like there's sort of an economic argument. Maybe it'll be all right. Yeah. And I'm a little worried sometimes also by some of the technologists I hear are like, it's not that good. The technology is really not that good. It's actually, it's kind of like, hey, I see it every day, and behind the scenes, let me tell you, it's awful. Which I do hear a lot, but it's actually not that bad, and actually, maybe you're too close to it at some level to see the transformational impact it will have. But anybody want to add to that response in terms of just responding to this gentleman?
I just want to say, two quick points here is to say there are countries getting prepared. Finland is a big one, a good example of completely reform their educational system, abolish subjects, put kids to think and to solve problems, and then teach. We are in the era of information. We don't need information in schools. We need to actually make our kids think on how to actually further develop the world. So we need desperately for people to engage on that discussion, as Rob actually saying, to actually reformulate the whole educational system in US.
And I would just add very quickly, I mean, I think overall, this comes back actually to an earlier question, and our education system being an institution and thinking of it as an institution that is going to need to figure out how to evolve more quickly, or it's going to break. And I think that that's a danger with government. It's a danger with, honestly, a lot of our civic structures that you're feeling some real tension and cracks. And I think the education system is one that, like everybody else said, deserves more attention, because it's going to have to learn to adapt and evolve and focus on what those core skills are going to be, as opposed to this is the way we've always done it and we just need to do it better, which is unfortunately a lot of what education reform has done in the past. So we just need to execute better. We're going to test against it and make sure people are getting it, as opposed to what do people actually need. And I fear we're a very long way from a good answer to that and real action.
One last question. Last question of the evening.
Yep. So first of all, thank you, panelists, for doing this. So I guess during this entire discussion, I've noticed a lot of we have to keep things in mind, or we have to talk about, and various other sorts of problem constraint type of discussion. And so that's great and all, but that's not really a solution. And so lots of the rapid shift to AI is based on a lot of the economic benefits it provides. And so from that perspective, do you guys really think that a lot of the ethical quandaries introduced by AI can be solved by anything other than some sort of economic or maybe via mild corollary political means? And if so, what do you guys think the correct incentive structure should be? And for this particular question, I want anyone except for Dan to answer.
She knows who I am.
Please.
I'll just say that at the end of the day, AI systems are developed by people for people. So it is not this thing that you create, this thing we don't understand. The user feedback and whoever uses this, if the user is happy with that, is the only thing that determines if the system is successful or not, in my opinion. I think Cesar is not agreeing with me on this one.
I'm just to add on that one, there's something called generative artificial networks developed by Google, where there's no human interference for actually artificial intelligence to develop itself. So there's new ways to being actually developed that is not necessarily has human interference on that.
Ian developed that, and it still needs a lot of parameter tuning from the engineering
Who
side
made-
to
but
get
who
any
made
kind
that,
of
right?
GAN to work. So,
about GANs.
Absolutely.
so but I think as users, we are on the technology side, but we are also users of these systems. we have to provide feedback about what we don't like about the technology. If the system doesn't work for you, your mom, or your child, you should be vocal about this. You should say what you don't like about the system. And actually in the technology world, the kind of cases we saw with like Google's system not recognizing, African-American teenagers, or Microsoft face recognizer not recognizing dark-skinned people, so forth. There are cases for every AI system right now. These are important for the recognition and for the company, right? So there is a feedback from the users back to companies in terms of how much these technologies are appreciated, and they have to be taken into account. Just as you're using these technologies, question these systems, question what they are doing, and that feedback is going to be important going forward.
I would just add very, very quickly to that. I actually think the power of the economics is what's going to drive a lot of the company decisions, and that governments can play an important role and should. As somebody who worked in government a long time, I believe in the power of government to improve society, but I do think that the economic impacts to companies for behaving in ways that are beneficial to society as a whole, and new community norms that really drive companies to achieve those goals is going to be the biggest determining factor in how the companies actually go about the development of this technology.
Wonderful. All right. Thank everybody here. Thank you all for showing up. Thank you for the panel. Thank you to MIT and Ben for organizing this talk. And we'll be outside if you want to corner us on this topic. Thank you.
Try to bring some pollen.
Just make it more fun this way.